Hiring managers, what is the biggest red flag on a resume? I saw some guy who HSD posted in the "have you been arrested" part put the reason he was arrested: killed a man by dropping a boulder on his head. Checked it out online, and he was telling the truth. When I was about 14-15ish, my dad kinda pushed me to apply for a translating job at Sega. Good English. I needed a CV to apply, so my dad helped me make one. He told me to put my favorite games on my resume, and my dumbass not only agreed, but answered honestly, without a single Sega game on the top 5 list I made. This man is an hour manager of 20+ years. When people apply through Facebook jobs and it pulls the info from their profile, you end up with it like "went to the University of Life" or "I only work for me and no one else" as a headline on their application. It's hard to take that seriously. A very unprofessional email is definitely one. You see some insane emails. I knew someone who got an email address that had Big Daddy in it. Edit: for anyone who needs a professional email address, personally I find any combination of your first, middle, last names, initials, and birth date are all acceptable. In fact, any numbers but 420, 69, etc. and 123 is fine. It's absolutely worth having a very bland email for anything where you don't want your email to make a big impression. Illegal things, professional things, and emailing your grandma because she doesn't like text. Don't email your grandma from your Bootaslayer email. Edit 2, as some have mentioned below, 666 is also not a great number to add. And if your birth date happens to be a number on this list, pay special attention to how you format it. For instance, if your birthday is 420, format that along with the year as something like 042099. The person looking at your application will probably understand, and not think it's a joke. Edit 3. I did a bad job typing that. I meant any number but 420, 69. And as somebody added 666, and 123 is fine. I typed that first thing when I woke up with no coffee. Random numbers are okay. 123 is okay. If this phrase is written anywhere, my chickens have come home to roost. Military service, U.S. Army wife, Lieutenant Colonel. Edit: I feel I should clarify. I'm not a hiring manager, this story is from one that I know. I've had experience dealing depender, though. I once got a resume that listed under his awards section champion and master of the Chugen Tug at some dumb Asasu fraternity whose name I can't remember. I'm still not 100% certain what the frick that is, but I know I didn't want it. Listing every single accomplishment from high school and or middle school. When you've been out of high school for 10+ years. Had a guy list every part he got in a musical play, sports he played, with scores, clubs he was a part of, etc. All of these dated from at least elementary school on. The man was 50+. The job had nothing to do with any of these items. I once had a guy submit a resume saying that he could not work with women or speak to any woman due to religious reasons. I'm all for being tolerant of other people's beliefs, but this was for a customer service job. If you can't interact with women at all, then maybe this wasn't the kind of job he should have been applying for. Doesn't stop me from hiring anyone, but changes things up when someone says they speak another language. If it's Spanish, you'll be interviewed in Spanish. Sometimes that goes very poorly for the applicant. Not an employer, but failed miserably to get a high school job. I thought I was doing everything right. I mentioned previous volunteer experience, work ethic, and always came dressed in a button-up shirt, slacks, and a tie for interviews, or even asking about a job. After a year of getting turned down by Taco Bell, KFC, and really any good high school job I found the issue. Under the previous criminal charges section I put assault and battery. 17-year-old me had a loose grasp on the legal system and didn't realize that getting arrested for a fight is not the same as being charged with a felony. I had been arrested on an assault misdemeanor, but never charged. Unfortunately that revelation didn't come until I applied for military service and was told my felony charge was a permanent disqualification. I'm the kind of manager who will go for someone with less experience if they have a good interview. Obviously you need to check some things off experience-wise, customer service, data entry etc, but I know most people can learn on the job. One thing I despise in resume or cover letter is crowded wording and minimal gaps. I don't need to see your work history from your McDonald's days at 14. I need to see the last 5 if it's relevant to the job. I was a manager at a trampoline park when I was 16/17 and did all the interviews since the majority of the applicants went to the same high school as me. There was a guy that was in his late 30s who had hardly any job experience and a bachelor's degree. It was literature related. His age was kinda weird since most of the staff were in high school college, but having a degree completely caught me off guard. Asked him why he wanted to work minimum wage when he had a degree. He explained that he was going to be a teacher but they wouldn't hire him because of his criminal history. He proceeded to tell me he had sexually assaulted a child. He was applying for a job at a kid's trampoline park. Looked on the cameras before he left since he gave me a real bad feeling and saw him taking pictures of kids. He left before I could confront him, so I gave his resume and a hard drive with the entire recording of his visit to the local police department. I interview an Indian guy who had surfing the internet and shooting pistols as his hobbies. I wanted to hire him on the spot to be our wild card. My husband built a life-sized Iron Man suit on his resume. He got the interview because they wanted to meet the kind of guy who has an Iron Man suit and the personality to put it on his resume. He also got the job, which is pretty cool. The guy who applied for a design job and attached a photoshopped image of him as a centaur comes to mind. Also typos. I was hiring a very senior level person who seemed like they could do an amazing job, but there were several typos on her resume. I asked the recruiter to let her know. Edit for clarification. The question what about red flags? Not why did you throw out a perfectly good resume for petty reasons? Neither of the resumes were tossed. The centaur applied at that time we had no open positions and the typo person got the interview and after a rigorous hiring process was determined to have great skills, but not what we needed. The typo person misspelled her very large font and easy to spell job title. And of course my most upvoted comment on Reddit is about a guy who sent a photoshopped image of him as a centaur along with his resume. We had an application where the applicant had a felony on their record. They spent half a page in the middle of their resume explaining how the felony wasn't their fault and that we should hire them. Their felony was from stealing from another department from the last time they worked at the company they were applying to. It's a big company so I'd think they were hoping we wouldn't care since we were in a different department. I don't know how they made it through the HR pre-screen and how they weren't on the do not hire list. People keep saying gaps in work history but honestly guys, make sure you inquire about it before just writing someone off. I had a guy who had a year or 2 gap in his resume. Most people would just write this dude as well obviously there's something wrong with him. Well there was. The dude was diagnosed with brain cancer and had to go through intensive treatment. He lived but came out the other end jobless. Couldn't find work afterwards because of the gap. I could tell he was a smart dude who just had a bad hand of cards. He was hired and he's honestly worked out great and still works at that company. I wasn't an actual manager my old firearms retail job, but being that I was the senior sales associate, my manager included my input in the hiring process, which entailed a lot of resume reviews. We had a guy in his late teens early 20s drop off a resume for an open gunsmith position. He had no technical training, no gunsmith training, and had never even owned a gun before. He had recently joined the National Guard, and his only experience with firearms was basic orientation and cleaning of the M16 in basic training. His resume basically said just this. In one run-on sentence, his resume explained that he had no idea how to write a resume and had no training in gunsmithing, but that he needed a job, was interested in guns, so please disregard all this and give him a job because he was serving his country. A watermark of their face on each page of the resume. Edit. This was in Canada for a food retail position. I used to do the hiring tridge for a university library. Gearing up for the full semester, I'd have to read through 500 plus applications. My record was in the 750s, for a usual 30 hires. Used to get some terrible ones. The most common were L33TTXTSPK all lowercase all caps 3-word answers to multi-part questions, no federal work study award. Not an indication of a bad applicant, but we were clear up front that we couldn't hire anyone without it. Simply couldn't afford it, since a student with WS cost us about 1/3 what an hourly student would. Terrible availability, also not an indication of a bad applicant, but if you say you're only available for 2 hours Tuesday, Thursday, and every other Wednesday, don't expect a call. Ignoring the questions about putting things in alphabetical or numerical order, doing them but obviously not reading the directions, ascending versus descending order, or, to lesser extent, getting them wrong. Normally, calling to check up on your application was an immediate bump up to be forwarded on for further consideration, assuming availability in WS checked out, but if you had your parents call. Came in one day, I worked 4 PM to 2:30 AM, to a blinking light on my phone, indicating voicemail. Checked it. Several messages. First message, 8:30ish am, was from an angry woman demanding I call back by 12 to explain why we hadn't hired her son. Second message, 10:30ish am, same woman, snarling that I hadn't called, and that she would have my job because her son had work study, therefore we legally must hire him. Lol, no, because he wants to work in the library. Third message, 11ish am, from my supervisor, wondering if I could find the son's application, as she'd gotten an angry voicemail from the mother, and when she looked in my files, she hadn't seen it anywhere. Other, normal messages followed. Well, since this woman demanded I call before 12, I was all gung-ho to call her at 11:45 PM, to explain my work schedule to her, and that I couldn't legally discuss her son's application anyway. But, I figured I should talk to my supervisor, and at least warn her of this plan. Turns out, when the woman called again, around 2 PM, she got forwarded to my supervisor, who had remembered the internal online database of applicants I'd created for her and the other hiring supervisors to check when I was out. Using that, she discovered that the kid's file wasn't in my desk because I'd initially rated him fairly well, worth another look. Armed with that info and notes on his file, she told mommy dearest what was going on. Damn, I wish I could have seen that woman's face when she was told we didn't hire her son because he never called us back when we contacted him for an interview. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment.